And thanks to all our guests for taking the time to join us this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Pittwater area, the Gadigal people. I'm Dale Cohen, the publisher of the Northern Beaches Advocate, which was set up when the Manly Daily stopped printing. My background is media and technology, having built and run some of Australia's largest websites, such as NBCAN and Telstra Big Pond. Just in the interests of full transparency for tonight's discussion, given it is a political discussion, I am affiliated with the Liberal Party on the Northern Beaches. Welcome to all the people here tonight taking an interest in local issues and wanting to make sure that you cast your vote wisely. I'm looking forward to helping you get to know the people who want to be Northern Beaches future councillors and to understand what they might do for us on two of the most important issues we face. In case you weren't aware, the Northern Beaches is made up of 5 different voting areas called wards. They're Pittwater, Narrabeen, Frenchs Forest, Curl and Manly. Tonight, we're only talking with candidates who would like to represent the ward of Pittwater. We'll meet the candidates and ask them 2 questions related to the environment and the economy for which they were asked to provide pre-recorded answers before we clarify any questions from the audience. The organisers of tonight's event have been very careful to make this platform fair and equal chance for candidates to demonstrate their intent, and it's up to you, the audience, to decide what fits with your values. Some may find politics boring, but it has never been more important to understand what our elected officials are passionate about and how they are willing to act for us. Beyond the basics of cleaning the streets and taking care of our parks, what else can our council leaders do if we empower them to act? So let's go ahead and meet the people who want to represent us in the next term of council. Our first candidate tonight is Miranda Korzey from the Greens, who is a journalist and long-term Pittwater resident. Miranda has worked on a range of environmental campaigns such as Stopping PEP 11 and Canopy Keepers. Miranda, just keeping to 30 seconds, please. Can you tell us what is important to you environmentally?
Well, I guess the basics of it are respecting and protecting our land, sea and air that we breathe in the local area. Climate change an action and mitigation to the effects of climate change are going to complicate that. But there are all sorts of issues like protecting our bushland, our oceans, protecting that from pollution of various sorts, PEP 11 and plastics, protection of or remediation of sites with chemical pollution and asbestos. There's lots of chemical pollution in local waterways. So, there's a range of things there.
Thank you very much, Miranda. Next up is Sarah Turnbull from the Your Northern Beaches Independent team and candidate for Pittwater. Author and journalist, Sarah is passionate about protecting our natural environment. Sarah, can you tell us what is important to you environmentally?
Yeah, that's a really big question, Dale. Thanks. Look, firstly, I'm just going to answer it with 2 brief points. I think COP26 has made it abundantly clear that in the next few years, we have to, our carbon emissions and methane levels have to plummet. The other thing that COP26 has made abundantly clear is that we cannot look to our federal government to provide leadership on this critical issue. So that leaves the state governments and local governments to really lead the way and in reducing emissions. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing is protecting the environment. That's really important to me. It's important to my fellow candidate and in the Pittwater team for Your Northern Beaches independent team, Mike Genscher and Ian White. And that means, protecting oceans, our beaches, protecting our tree canopy, and just ensuring that that all that we have, the natural beauty of Pittwater, is here for future generations.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Next is James Ricketson, an independent candidate for Pittwater. James has lived in Pittwater for 50 years. He is an award-winning documentary filmmaker who was imprisoned on politically motivated charges of espionage in Cambodia in 2017. James says he was jailed for speaking the truth to power and is prepared to take on those in power within the Northern Beaches Council. James, can you tell us what is important to you environmentally?
So look, I'm concerned that future generations look back at us not with anger, but with thanks for all that we've done to protect the very precious environment that we've been privileged to experience. And after 50 years here, I've seen changes that, if they were to continue, would diminish all that makes this area magical.
Thank you very much. Okay, so what we've done is tonight we've asked the candidates to think about two questions relating to the environment that kept coming up from the community. We wanted to provide the candidates a fair opportunity to make sure their answers were well considered and focused on the questions. So they were asked to provide a pre-recorded answer. When you are watching their pre-recorded answers, if anything springs to mind that you need clarity on, please use the Q&A function to ask a question. That's the Q&A as opposed to the chat. Towards the end of the meeting, we will have a chance to ask the candidates questions you have posed in the Q&A to help you decide how you should cast your vote. Okay, so let's get to it and ask our candidates the top two questions that were raised with the Northern Beaches Environment Network by the community to get a sense of what they would do if they were elected to council. So the first question, given that council has passed a resolution declaring a climate emergency, within the confines of your powers as a future councillor and within council jurisdiction, what would you do to accelerate carbon neutrality within your term by 2025 if you were to become a councillor? So this is how Miranda Korzey answered that question.
Hello everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging Nat Warren's work with the community as a Green on Council in initiating its membership of the Cities Power Partnership and the Council's declaration of a climate emergency. That work laid the foundation for the Council's moves towards net zero carbon emissions and encouraging the community to do so too, which I welcome. As councillor, I'll continue that work and look for ways to make the Council's aspirational target of 2030 a reality. In fact, the Council's own Climate Change Action Plan provides pointers to how this can be done. Under the Cities Power Partnership, we're committed to achieving 5 goals. The Council met the first with its introduction of renewable energy. That leaves 4 to go: improving energy efficiency, more sustainable transport, and collaboration to set citywide emissions standards, as well as supporting local residents and businesses to tackle climate change. As the Council strategy notes, we still have room for improvement, including converting any gas-powered council facilities, which in 2016-17 created 6% of all council's carbon emissions, to electricity, and progressively replacing council's petrol or diesel engine vehicles, responsible for 12% of carbon emissions, with electric ones. Providing charging points for electric vehicles in our town centres will also encourage their uptake in the community. We can also work with the state government to advocate for replacement of local buses with electric vehicles and better connections to the outer reaches of Pittwater so that commuters don't have to take their cars to meet the beeline or travel to work. In terms of energy efficiency, we can replace standard appliances and equipment, such as air conditioners, as they wear out, with more energy efficient ones. And we can upgrade lighting in all buildings, on the streets and at other council facilities to LEDs. I welcome the Council's commitment to planting 5,000 trees per year. However, we must also protect our old growth trees. They not only store carbon and provide homes for wildlife, but can reduce summer temperatures by at least 5 degrees Celsius. To do this, we must change the culture through education and, for example, by introducing a tree removal application system with notifications to neighbours. Standards should also be reviewed for energy efficiency in housing and new or upgraded council buildings. For example, research by NASA and the US Environmental Protection Agency says that changing roofs to white or green, as in vegetated rooftops, can reduce urban temperatures by close to 2 degrees C. The Council's made a good start on its journey to net zero carbon emissions, but there's still plenty of work for the next batch of councillors. I'd be honoured if you elected me amongst them. Thank you.
But I'm really glad to have the opportunity to respond to the questions, because concern about climate change is what started me on this journey, which has led me to run for council. Probably like a lot of you, I've watched the federal government's lack of action with a mix of dismay, anger, and often utter disbelief. And at some point, I decided to channel that energy into doing something at a local level for my community. I'd never belonged to a political party before, but I joined the Your Northern Beaches independent team because its goals resonate with my belief in the need for strong climate action. The two main sources of carbon pollution are, we know, energy and transport. Under Mayor Michael Regan, Northern Beaches Council has done a great job of reducing emissions by switching all its buildings and streetlights to renewable energy. This move has resulted in an 80% reduction. Council is also leading the way on the shift to electric vehicles, installing charging stations and changing its vehicles. Currently, it is committed to meeting its emissions reduction target by 2045. It's on track to achieve that target much earlier. And if I'm elected, I would push to have that more ambitious goal formalised with a firm commitment to a 2030 target. As well as reducing its own emissions, Council has a vital role to play in empowering and supporting community-led initiatives. I'm going to talk about one project as an example of the role Council can play. It's the plan to make Avalon Surf Club carbon neutral by 2023. It started with an energetic local, Lena Wood. Now about 1/4 of the club's roof is covered in solar panels. Funding came from three sources, beginning with an initial grant from Council, which was matched by the club, and then the remainder was raised by the community. The next more ambitious step is to fund the purchase of a battery. This would enable the surf club to become a provider of energy, which it can then sell on. Avalon Surf Club could conceivably power local businesses. It could power Barrenjoey High. Already, Carbon Neutral Club 2023, as it's called, has become a blueprint for other surf clubs in the area. If we are to achieve net zero by 2030, and we can, it's going to be by working together. Council has a critical role to play in this type of collaboration. If elected to represent Pittwater, I would work to empower the community and support initiatives that are innovative, based on science, and absolutely achievable.
What is important to me environmentally is that I do whatever I can to see to it that future generations of Sydney-siders, Australians, our children, our children's children, and our children's children's children inherit an environment that is healthy and as beautiful as the one that we are privileged to enjoy right now. That means making certain sacrifices. It means
putting the environment and the future ahead of our own immediate concerns very often. So when the question arises, where is the money going to come from? I like to think of it from the perspective of the future. What will our children's children be saying about us in 50, 100 years' time? Will they be cursing us for having despoiled the environment that we live in? Or will they be thanking us for the sacrifices, and only small sacrifices really, that we made in order that they could actually enjoy what we enjoy now?
I'm Alex McTaggart. I'm formerly a Pittwater councillor, and lately I've been a member of the Northern Beaches Council for the Pittwater Ward. I was the chair of the Natural Environment Strategic Reference Group for the first 2.5 years under the new council. So let me try and give you before I answer your question, I'll just try and give you a bit of an overview. So at the start of the new council, they surveyed the community to develop the Community Strategic Plan, or the CSP. Every time we went to the community in the different forums from Manly through to Palm Beach, the natural environment was the number one issue. And when we were doing the LSPS, which is the Local Strategic Planning Strategy 2040, the same thing came up every time. So my role as chair of the Natural Environment Strategic Reference Group was to ensure that in every document the natural environment is the number one issue before we progress into the business issue, transport and all of those things. We made the natural environment the key issue. And that made the Natural Environment Strategic Reference Group the prominent reference group on council. And we had some very, very good members, very committed members, committed to environment, well qualified. So, and under my chairmanship, we took the stance on Adani. We took the stance on the PEP 11, the first part of PEP 11, which was the seismic sounding, and we also declared the climate emergency. Now, that was under my chairmanship. I didn't nominate them because they were done via Councillor Warren the Green, and they were done that way so that they would have the support of the Mayor and his team. What you don't want is something as important as a climate emergency position to be not adopted because of party politics. So you, as the chair, what you do is you ensure.
Thank you very much to all our candidates for providing those responses to us. It's very much appreciated. And I think it gives everybody a fair opportunity to consider their responses and respond to those questions. So now that we've sort of thought of and heard from people on those things, I think it's commendable to have good intentions and even better to have clear policies, but intentions aren't actions, and actions require commitment of resources, as Councillor McTaggart was just saying, which requires allocation of funding. So with that in mind, we'll move on to the second question, which is partly what Councillor McTaggart addressed within his video. So the second question is, where would you recommend council draws the money from to fund your recommended environmental projects? So let's first go to Miranda Korzey and see how she answered this question.
Hi everyone. I want to begin this discussion of funding the transition to renewables by noting that Northern Beaches Council says its switch to 100% renewable electricity in February will cut an estimated $1.9 million from its bills over the next 7 years and 9 years off its commitment to swap to green alternatives. However, where new infrastructure is needed to enable the transition to a carbon neutral world, loans and government grants should be accessed rather than cutting services or staff on council. This is an investment for the future, and we know that someone is going to have to foot the bill for the costs of this massive reorientation of the world economy. However, we must make sure that where the public pays, it also reaps the rewards down the track, so that any renewable infrastructure at council level, as elsewhere, should remain in public hands. We can't afford for services to be cut when so many in the community are reeling from COVID impacts on their incomes, either through loss of work or their businesses. One area targeted by some councillors for savings is executive salaries, but they are set in accordance with government guidelines and staff have employment contracts. Pittwater Council borrowed to build infrastructure, and at a time when we have low interest rates, borrowing is a sound financial decision. The costs will be spread out over many years and will make savings for the council environmentally, helping to avoid the devastating impacts of floods, bushfires and beach erosion, as well as financially in the long run. I am also concerned that the transition doesn't leave less well-off people in our community behind, for example, encouraging affluent homeowners to invest in solar panels, which leaves those who can't afford them to draw on increasingly expensive fossil-fuelled power from the grid. However, this is a problem that must be addressed at high levels of government. Thank you.
Where would you recommend council draws the money from to fund your recommended environmental project? To answer the second question, I'm just going to make a couple of brief points. Firstly, although switching to clean energy can require investment, it also may be cheaper in the long run. This is the case, for example, with council's initiative to run street lighting on green power. Making the switch from black energy will result in a projected saving over 7 years of $1.9 million. Upgrading to low energy air conditioning systems and replacing insulation in windows, fitting solar panels. All these measures are costs which bring long-term savings. If elected, I'd like to see these savings reinvested in energy efficiency and in reducing carbon emissions. This used to happen under the previous Pittwater Council. It was called the Revolving Power Scheme. Under this scheme, old buildings were retrofitted with energy-saving devices, and the savings were put into a pool, and this money was reinvested to help fund new initiatives. It's an effective way of tracking, measuring, and making savings accountable. To be honest, though, questions about how we're going to pay for these investments may slightly miss the point. The bigger question is perhaps the price we will pay for not meeting our emissions reduction target. Global warming has already resulted in natural disasters all over the world, including in Australia and on the beaches and in Pittwater. These events have not only resulted in the loss of lives, they've also caused catastrophic costs. That's why I was heartened when Northern Beaches Council went on the front foot and, with the exception of 2 councillors, declared a climate emergency. It's not about spreading fear. It's about listening to the science and being proactive so that young people of Pittwater and generations to come can look to the future with optimism.
Now, where the money comes from, I don't know. That's not an area of my expertise. All I know is that in any kind of budgeting, you have to prioritise what your most important needs are at a particular time, but also what your needs are going to be in the future. So you don't spend money frivolously on what you want just now. You think, okay, I'll spend some of my money on what I want just now, but I'm going to put some of my money aside for things that I'm going to need in the future. So I think that what's required of all of us, and this includes the council, it includes local government, and includes state government and the federal government, is we've got to change our way of thinking from what works for me now, what works for me for the current electoral cycle, what works for me in my brief 70 or 80 years on Earth, what is going to work for our children's children's children in 50 years' time, 100 years' time, and 200 years' time. So it's a whole new way of thinking about the environment, I think, that's required. And once we have all acquired that way of thinking, then I think finding the money will move to the top of our list of priorities. That's all I can really say. Where the money comes from, I don't know at this particular point. And as a candidate in the election, I would rather not speculate about things that I don't know about. I will find out more if I'm elected, or even if I'm not elected, I want to find out more anyway. So anyhow, that's probably enough from me for the time being. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, moving on to the question that you raised. I have an entirely different position. Okay, so you ask about the ability of individual councillors to make change. Okay, so I've got to read this because it's how we go. So your group states that carbon is your most important issue, and you want future councillors to outline how to accelerate council's reductions in greenhouse gases. In other words, you're looking for some sort of silver bullet. Okay? Well, I have a different position on that. See, in my opinion, climate change response is the responsibility of every citizen, all 275,000 who live on the northern beaches. Now, it requires a change in attitude and culture and habit and understanding and want to be able to do this. Now, council, through its planning controls, its waste management, its climate education policies, all of these little things that they do, they have a significant ability to make subtle changes to how residents go about the day-to-day activities. Now, those subtle changes become embedded. That means long-term embedded change in the community. So that's the most important thing that council can do. It can initiate just through the things that it does. So council's also responsibility for its own operational footprint. Okay, now, so to do that, we have the Northern Beaches Environment and Climate Change Strategy 2014, and I'd encourage all of your followers, all of the potential new councillors, all of the candidates to look at the document. Okay. Now I'm going to sound a little bit like what's his name, Mr. Morrison, but it's a plan. It's a strategy. Okay. The thing is, the detail gets added to each topic as it's developed. But you have to have a plan and a strategy so that you can develop a budget to support the plan. So, okay, and so many of the actions are interrelated. That is across the business of council. I mean, the council has 57 different service delivery programs. So many of them affect climate, but they affect our. You've got a budget for them. So it's development of policy and work by committee. Okay, this method's boring. It's tedious. Okay, it's not sexy, but in the long.
I'm assuming that's where Alex's video stops. Excellent. We got there eventually. So given, Sarah, I think we probably gave you the hardest time with your second answer there. We might even lead off with a question for you out of the Q&A that has been submitted for us tonight. So, Sarah, I'll ask you this first question, which is the council has good intent and most residents have care and concern for the environment, but most of us live here because of the environment, and yet Pittwater has had the greatest tree canopy loss of any LGA in the state between 2009 and 2016. I'm not sure if that's right. That's what Deborah has said, but we'll assume it's right. And Sarah, you may be able to confirm that. What will you actually do to turn the tide on tree clearing that has become a critical and urgent issue in our area? Sarah.
Yeah, look, thanks for that. And it is a really important, critical issue. Since the state law, the 1050 state law came in, we have lost a tremendous proportion of canopy trees in Pittwater. And part of that also has been due to development and also the increasing size of houses on the house builds. So I think there are a couple of things we need to do. One thing I would like to do is lobby the state government to have the power to manage, return the power to manage the tree canopy to council. The other thing I think we need to look at is development. What can we how can we tweak or tighten the LEPs to ensure that, to make it more difficult to cut down trees, and also to reduce the scale, the size and bulk of houses, because as long as we're approving really large builds on private land, we're going to be cutting down trees. So I think there's a couple of things that we need to do. I'd also like to see an education program on the part, a really effective program with we need to understand what trees do for us, the role they play in the environment, habitats for animals, but also as carbon sinks, they store carbon. I think there are ways of measuring that, or having a significant tree register that is also not just on public land, but also on private land. So I think there are multiple, there's not just one thing we need to do. I think there are multiple things we need to do, but I do think it's really, really critical because the loss has been extreme in Pittwater, and we need to see our trees as for the valuable assets that they are.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Miranda, I'll move on to you for the next question. I'm going to go a little rogue and pull one out of the Q&A here. So this one's from Steve.
Could I just have a go at that one first too,
No,
please?
no, Miranda, I'm moving them around precisely because everybody gets one. And the reason is because, to be fair to all the candidates, we want to make sure that you don't get time to consider your answer to a question.
Well, it's just
someone
that
else has
I'm
asked.
a member of Canopy Keepers
I fully understand,
set up to protect the canopies.
I'm asking the question.
Okay,
so,
fair enough.
You might like this one anyway. So it's from Steve Jacobs. How can candidates equate reducing climate change with the increase of medium to high density development, which is currently being proposed by council?
Well, I think that there are two issues that can actually be separated quite easily. I mean, I think that, the council can't do everything to reduce climate action, to reduce carbon emissions on the northern beaches. So it can do all sorts of things. The issue of development is a separate issue, I think. We will have to bring emissions down, whether we have development or not. Now, my position on development is that we need to, well, I think people up here want to limit development in our villages and keep low-rise villages, sort of low profile, sort of human scaled development. So we're looking in places like Newport and Avalon, we're sort of looking at probably no more than 2 or 3 stories. In Mona Vale it might be up to 4 stories. And some of that development will be, well, the Greens will want that to include up to 30% affordable housing because that's our area of greatest need. So we wouldn't see a huge amount of extra development. We're opposed to development up at Ingleside, certainly, on the scale that is proposed at the moment. So yes, if you bring more people into an area, there'll be more emissions, but there'll be more emissions anyway, wherever they're living. So yeah, I think the two issues are not directly connected. But yes, I mean, the council can encourage people to put solar panels on the roof or create microgrids or all sorts of things to reduce emissions if they're for any future development. But that doesn't really matter whether it's new development or older development, older existing housing.
Thanks, Miranda. Okay, James, we'll move on to you for a question to answer now. So what I would like to ask you is, Dylan has asked, will you commit to influencing Northern Beaches Council on building affordable and social housing despite potential outcry from residents and developers?
Will I commit myself? Look, my position, I'm very much a late comer to this whole business. I only decided to run a few days before the close of the applications. And my position on pretty much everything at the moment is that when an issue arises, and affordable housing is one of those issues, what I'd like to do is to be appraised fully of what affordable housing actually is, how much it's going to cost, and who's going to pay for it. Now, I was part of the reason why I've decided to run is because I actually asked a question in council one day about medium density housing, and I wasn't able to get an answer. So when I know precisely what affordable housing involves and who's going to pay for it, as a councillor, what I would do is talk to the constituents, talk to the people who I represent, find out what how they think about it, and then represent them in council. The problem, I think, with all of these developments, whether that's medium density housing or fish and chip shops, is that we as residents, constituents, are not given enough information to be able to make informed decisions about what we want. And so I'm committed to transparency, accountability, and really good communication with constituents. So if it seems as though I'm not answering your question, it's because I don't have enough facts about precisely what low income housing means. Who is going to pay for it? How long the people who are resident in the low density housing can stay there before it becomes available for rental or sale to people who have decent incomes. I don't know the answer to these questions, and so it's difficult for me to have a solid opinion at this particular point. More information, consultation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's a good answer. Okay, Sarah, I'll move back to you for our next question. This one's also from the Q&A. This is from Lee Walters. Given the probable willingness of local residents to purchase electric cars in the near future, is the council prepared to encourage this, i.e. with adequate charging stations and perhaps reduced fees for locals? I guess really it's what do you think about that, and how would you promote that?
Sorry, yes, because not being a councillor at the moment, it's well, there's an existing, I know council has already, they've put in a charging station in Mona Vale. I think council has done a lot in this area actually, and obviously there's more that can be done. I'm not. Sorry, the question was whether I would support the.
Yeah, so based on the willingness of residents
Yeah.
to purchase electric vehicles, the question
Yeah.
is really, how would you like council to promote uptake?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot that that council can do, and a lot more it could be doing. It's sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm getting a bit stressed here.
That's all right. We can move on if you want to. But essentially, from the point of view of electric vehicles, do you think that they're important, and do you think it's something council should be involved in?
Absolutely. I think it's really important. But I also think it's all those, solar, the shift to solar. I think what council is doing with electric vehicles, its own fleet, and encouraging people to take up electric vehicles, that's really important. So more charging stations, that's hugely important. Making it affordable, yes. I guess my comment on that would be one thing to remember is that I guess residents account for 20% of all emissions. So if we're talking about, one of my big things is the big aim is lowering emissions and lowering methane. And if we're looking at that, then 44% of all emissions are from local business, or from business, sorry. I think it's 29 or 27%, something like that, is from industry. So they're the areas, and big business has already taken up and been doing a lot to change its practices. Where I think council could do so much is by targeting local businesses and by incentivising, really is what I mean, local business to make changes and to reduce waste and reduce emissions.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, Miranda, I will come back to you for our next question. This one was from Joy, and she asked, when will council provide compost waste collection bins? Given, again, you're not on council yet, I think the question is probably, what do you think about the issue, and what do you think about composting and council's role in it?
Yeah, absolutely. We would I and the Greens would be looking at doing it straight away, basically, in the next council. And, it's been trialled in various places, including Canberra. And it means that people who can't compost at their homes for one reason or another, like they're living in a flat, are able to then, their waste, their organic waste is able to be recycled. So, yeah, it's a great idea, and that's part of our platform.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, the next one, James, I'll throw this one to you. It's a little involved and long, so I'll basically summarise it as it's about coastal DAs, development on the seafront. So Rowan has asked, despite Northern Beaches Council understanding that the preservation and enhancement of our natural environment and coast are the most important issues for our community, Council still considers developments and building expansions in coastal erosion zones, prone to storm damages and climate change-induced sea level rise. The Narrabeen Rockpool Cafe proposal from a couple of years ago, Avalon Surf Lifesaving Club, Collaroy North Narrabeen Wall, and the proposed Newport Surf Lifesaving Club expansion, to name a few. What will councillors do to stop this madness when it comes to coastal development DAs, asks Rowan.
Oh, that's a tricky one. Again, I think we need to be thinking in terms of 20, 30, 40, 50 years hence. Does it make sense to be building anything in an area that might be inundated due to climate change at some point in the future? But again, as with everything, I'd really like to see, and because I'm not on council, I haven't actually seen the plans, and I don't know how far above the water level these buildings are going to be built, whether they're going to be built on stilts or what. So it's a difficult question to answer in a general sense, or in a specific sense rather. But generally, I'd say it's a bad idea to be building seawalls. I don't think the idea of seawalls is very good. It's a bad idea to be building edifices that may well be inundated in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. That's not really a terribly adequate answer to the question, but I think, as with everything, what I would need if I was a councillor would be a detailed plan of what was proposed, a detailed diagrams, sketches, artists' impressions, and so on, that could then be shown to the community with all of the information about the impacts that the environment would have on these buildings, so that the community, the constituents, could actually make informed decisions. I think that I'll probably leave it at that.
That sounds like a rather informed answer, actually. Thank you, James. Sarah, I'll come back to you, and this will be the second last question. Miranda, you will get the last question. Sarah, Melinda asked, when are they going to bring in effective recycling program for heavy goods? Again, not being on council yet, I guess, what are your thoughts about heavy goods recycling?
Sorry, I imagine Miranda means the bulky goods pickup, is that right? Because at the moment, all of that, that is a real issue. All of that goes into landfill at the moment. And yeah, I think that absolutely, it's a really good question. And I don't know, maybe we need to think big or dream up, you know, we could have men's sheds. I think somehow we need to reintroduce that whole idea of repairing things and reusing. And so whether it's kind of men's sheds or, I don't know, some community programs, but we need to relearn those skills of reusing materials that can be reused. And I don't think it is good enough that 100% of our, of the bulky goods collection, for example, goes into landfill. So I think it's time to dream up some a different approach.
Completely agree. Okay, Miranda, you can have the lucky last. Belinda Wannis has asked, have any of the candidates, so I guess you, considered the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are now a critical framework for governments across the world? These were developed to lead greener, more inclusive economies and stronger, more resilient societies. And I would like to think that some of the candidates know about them and have considered them. So, Miranda, do you know about them? Have you considered them? Belinda would like to know.
Yes, I do know about them. I can't remember them all offhand, but I have to say that a large number of them actually match up with Greens' policies. And so there's, you know, there's sort of various issues about alleviation of poverty and sort of a just transition to renewables, and sort of health, you know, environmental health is part of it. I'm afraid I can't remember them all, but I was actually asked this question at another forum recently, so I should remember them all. But yeah, there are 17 of them. But yeah, if anybody wants to check, I have checked them since, and you know, I guess the Greens policy for a just transition to renewables, where basically nobody misses out, so that you know, this is an opportunity where we can reimagine our economy so that it's we don't just have billionaires owning the power generation assets and the infrastructure, the grid and all those sorts of things, but it could be publicly owned, and that would create a just transition. And that, you know, we have to take care of, you know, there are going to be issues with, for example, rising temperatures in the tropics. So health is going to be a major issue, where we have diseases like malaria and dengue fever becoming more common, quite possibly in places like Sydney even. Certainly dengue fever up in Northern Australia. Yeah, there's a whole range of things, but yeah, caring for the environment, a just transition are definitely on the Greens agenda.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of good alignment there for you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Miranda, and thank you to all the candidates for answering all the questions and giving us some really good answers there. So now it's time to wrap up. The local government election is being held on Saturday, the 4th of December. To vote on the day, you'll need to attend a polling place in Pittwater, and there is a full list of polling places on the New South Wales Electoral Commission website. Generally speaking, it'll be community centres, schools and surf clubs as the main locations. Okay. And remember to wear a mask. Pre-poll locations will be open from next Monday, the 22nd of November. If you wish to vote in person, but before election day, you can go to one of the two pre-poll locations in Pittwater, which are Mona Vale Memorial Hall and Avalon Recreation Centre. They'll be open 9 to 5 every day except Sundays. And you can also postal vote, and the reasons have been expanded this year to include concern about your safety because of COVID-19. If you don't wish to go to any polling place, that actually really allows anybody to qualify for a postal vote. Just visit the New South Wales Electoral Commission website to apply, or find the links to the online application form. We wrote a story, the Northern Beaches Advocate wrote a story about this and published it on Sunday, so you can find easy links from that article to either a paper form or to the online application. And voting will also be possible online, but the criteria for that is quite strict, and it's unlikely many people would qualify. To find out whether you do, visit the New South Wales Electoral Commission website. Okay, so thank you to everyone for coming. Tonight was the second event in the series, which is going to every ward on the Northern Beaches. Introducing all the candidates to answer the questions about the environment and the economy, who will protect it and how it'll be funded. If you'd like to tell your friends and family in different wards of the Northern Beaches, please get them to search for Northern Beaches election candidates, environment and economy, and just share it with them from there. So look for tomorrow night's showcase, which will be up in French's Forest. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Dale. That was very fair questioning, I thought, despite the fact we're sitting on the other side of the political fence from each other.
Oh, yeah, Miranda, there's no way. Like, I'm not here for that tonight. That's not why.
No, it was great.
Thanks, Dale. And thank you for being kind. I completely freaked out.